Welcome to Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, my co-host, Stephen Young of Roto Grinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the Straight Talk Wireless 400 at Homestead Miami Speedway here on Running Hot. Last weekend at Las Vegas, Joey Logano made the fuel mileage work to take the victory and lock himself in to the championship for that win coming at the expense of Christopher Bell, who had the absolutely dominant car all day. Bell not quite able to make an extra pit stop work and catch Joey Logano. He finished second, and Daniel Suarez also making the fuel mileage work to finish third. So, Stevie, a pretty interesting race. We had an incident between Tyler Reddick, Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney got caught in it, 3 playoff drivers. But overall, I thought it was a fun race. What did you think of the race and also in the playoff scenario?
Yeah, I thought the race was great. Another really good 1.5. We keep talking about how good these races are. Obviously Las Vegas getting more tire wear, which I think is awesome for that racetrack. So, steep tracks with tire wear, I feel like creates and generates really good racing. And, you look back to the issue that happened on the track and Truex got a little tight. Elliott saw it was happening and Reddick couldn't see anything and he had a massive run. And with this car, you have to take massive runs. So I don't think anybody's really to fault in that wreck. I know Elliott's probably frustrated with Reddick. Reddick's probably frustrated with Truex, and Truex is probably just going, guys, I got tight, So it made a huge difference in the playoff run, which I feel like going into Homestead is super interesting. And I don't know, you look at it now with Tyler Reddick 30 below, Blaney 47 below, Chase Elliott was in that. He's 53, minus 53. Hamlin at minus 27. Like, do we really think that like William Byron and Kyle Larson are going to mess up this much? I don't. Joey Logano winning that race like threw a huge wrench into the playoffs. So I feel like if you're below the bubble, you're going into the next 2 weekends on strategies to win the race. Like if there's a caution that comes out at the end of stage 2 and you can get track position for the final stage, I don't think you stay out for stage points anymore. So a lot can happen, sure. But I mean, Homestead, outside of tire wear and potential tire issues, has been a track where we don't typically see a ton of, big wrecks and cautions. And Martinsville with this package, we don't see a bunch of big wrecks and cautions there. So I feel like if you're below the cutoff line, you're in the strategy to win a race now.
Yeah, and it gets really interesting because even if you're above the cutoff line, William Byron, Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, if one of those guys below the cutoff line wins, then the cutoff line moves up to above William Byron, right? And then Kyle Larson's right on the bubble, unless Byron leapfrogs him in points. Or if Bell has a bad day, then and Elliott or Blaney or Reddick win, I mean, all of a sudden Christopher Bell could be out. So nobody is safe here, which I think is interesting. Certainly if you're good on points, you feel like you're good on points unless one of those 4 below the cut line wins. But you can never feel safe about that because Denny Hamlin, Tyler Reddick, Ryan Blaney, and Chase Elliott all capable of winning races, especially at Homestead and Martinsville. Homestead and Martinsville is a strong track for pretty much all 4 of them. Maybe Tyler Reddick a little bit at Martinsville. In the past, Blaney at Homestead, but even recently, Blaney's been good at Homestead. So you got to think those 4 drivers could potentially win either of these races. So you have to be on your toes if you're Byron, Larson, or Bell as well. And speaking of Homestead, that's where we are headed this week. Homestead is a 1.5 mile oval. It is a pretty old track surface, so we get a lot of tire wear there. It's what we call a true oval. It has 180-degree turns at either end, pretty steeply banked. So a relatively unique track. Stevie, talk about racing at Homestead.
Really quick before we get into talking Homestead, Paul Wolfe, like golf clap. The dude is just so incredible. We've talked about it so long with Brad Keselowski and now with Joey Logano. I think he has 36 wins since he joined Penske in 2010. Another just masterclass on how to call a race last week. And I wanted to give him a shout out. Joey obviously driving the car. He's saving the fuel, saving the tires as much as possible. But, man, Paul Wolfe just continues to make incredible calls for that team. So I just wanted to give him a shout out. As far as Homestead, I mean, we go to Homestead, and like you said, it's kind of a unique racetrack. I think we can use a little bit of Darlington data. We could use a little bit of Auto Club data from last year. Hate that that track's no longer a thing. And then, like, I might even throw a little bit of Las Vegas data into my Homestead data this week, just because, like, Vegas is a steep track and it's getting more tire wear. And you know, that's with Vegas getting more tire wear, it's another somewhat comp to Homestead, but Homestead's kind of its own animal. I mean, it sits in the Miami sun for all year round and goes through the elements of Florida. And yeah, I mean, it's just a tire chewing racetrack that creates really good racing. And I miss the final being at Homestead.
Yeah, I wish finals at Homestead as well. And the nice thing about Homestead being a tire chewing racetrack, but also having the banking it has and the variable banking, you can run any line at Homestead, right? Which is great. You can obviously the high line tends to be the preferred line, but you can really run anywhere, high, low, middle at Homestead. You can get runs, you can do slide jobs, you can do all sorts of things there, which makes racing at Homestead extremely competitive and compelling to watch on TV. So I think it's going to be a great race. As far as comparable tracks, Stevie, I mean, obviously, I think we use Darlington as the most comparable track, as another steep track with high tire wear, intermediate. But anything else you're pulling in besides just Darlington?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, a little bit of Darlington, a little bit of Auto Club from last year, and a little bit of Vegas, and that's really it. I mean, recent speed always matters to me, but recent speed doesn't matter as much as like homestead data. You look back, even in the next gen era, if you go back pre next gen era, the guys that are good at Homestead have been good here, even in the next gen car. So I'll actually use a little bit of old data.
Yeah, for sure. My model pulls in pretty heavily track history this week. So some track history matters a little bit less, especially your Vegas and Kansas's, because you have other intermediates you can pull in. But Homestead, definitely a lot of track history. I will say, as far as comps, obviously number one is Darlington, but my model did find four other tracks that kind of are like secondary, maybe like tertiary comps, and that's Kansas, Vegas, Charlotte, and Dover.
Yeah.
So you can kind of pull in those four intermediates a little bit as well, just to kind of round out the like sample size, since we don't have a huge sample size on Homestead, going there only once a year. And then there's only one other major comp, which is Darlington. So those other four tracks, I think you can pull in a little bit just to get an idea of kind of a blend of those tracks, making up a little bit of similar style to Homestead. But any other factors to consider here at Homestead before we dive into our bets?
Not really. I feel like there's maybe a handful of drivers outside of the playoff 8 that have a chance, but overall, I feel like the playoff 8 is what you're looking for mostly here. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're going into the weekend. I didn't. We'll talk about it as we get into bets, but I don't have like a ton of outrights I like this week, and I'll probably wait post qualifying. I mean, they qualify early Saturday morning, so like we'll get lines up Saturday afternoon and be able to kind of compare to all the books and see what we like and what we don't like from practice and qualifying Saturday morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, there'll also be early practice, and the race will be midday on Sunday, so it could be a little bit different track temps, track conditions. It'll be possibly sunny on Saturday morning and possibly cloudy on Sunday during the race. So it could change things a little bit. It looks like wind direction's about the same. So I don't think it'll change too much in terms of like practice to the race, simply because sunny in the morning is still about as warm as cloudy midday down there. So I don't think the weather will matter too much. But if it does, if the track conditions especially change during practice, I think that's something to pay attention to as well. Because we know those early practices, the track heats up and often slows down. So that's something to pay attention to, at least as far as practice is concerned. But it is time to dive into the Homestead bets. As always, we'll take you for a lap around the track, 4 turns, 1 pick from each of us per turn before we drive into victory lane. So we're going to throw the green flag on the Straight Talk Wireless 400 and dive into turn 1. All right, turn 1, Stevie, you and I are on the same driver here. A little bit different bets. What do you have?
Yeah, I'm just on this driver in general. I like your bet as well. This is one I feel like we are very much on the same page, and I just thought this number was silly. I mean, it's Martin Truex Jr. for a top 10 at minus 115. I mean, there's no reason that Martin Truex Jr. should be minus 115 for a top 10 outside of the fact he's not in the playoffs and, he's on his final 3 races of his full-time racing career. So, I mean, you look at the speed in 2022, he was one of the best cars here. And you look at last year, I mean, he was second or third in just absolute speed. And they had the engine issue that ended his day. But, I mean, he was by far one of the best cars throughout the entire race last year. So, ran up front all day. He has one of the best average running positions here in the 2 races with the next-gen car. There's only like Blaney, Larson, and Byron better than him. So, my model thought this number was silly. I think this number is silly. This is one of the easiest bets for me this week is getting this top 10. It's moved to like minus 135 on some books. So definitely shop this one around. I like this one up until minus one, probably 25, 130. Yeah. I would even say like you could bet the minus 135 number or you could just bet Nick's bet. I think both of those make a ton of sense. But if you can get the top 10, anywhere under minus 125, I like it a lot. And minus 115 was a number I just instantly jumped on.
Yeah, and to your point, my bet is Truex top 5. You can get it plus 275. I like this down pretty far. My model has Truex for a top 5 finish right at 30%. So like plus, 225, 250 range. I'm fine with any of that. But Martin Truex Jr. top 5 finish. You mentioned how good he is here. Just to throw a couple stats at you, he has led 276 laps here at Homestead over the past 7 races. That is 15% of all the laps they've run over the last 7 Homestead races, or I should say 15% of his laps that he's run over the last 7 Homestead races. There was 30 laps that he didn't complete last year in a DNF. But other than that, he's completed every lap in the 6 Homestead races before that. So leading 15% of laps, I mean, that's ridiculous. And his finishes 1, 2, 2, 3, 6, 12, and 19. So when he's not having a DNF, he's finished inside the top 5, 4 out of the other 6 times. That's a pretty solid rate there. Now, obviously, he's in his final year. He hasn't been as good as in those past years, so we definitely are discounting it. I'm not saying he's going to be 4 out of 6 finishing in the top 5 going forward, which is why my model only has him at 30%, but 30% still a lot better than that plus 275 number.
Yeah, I mean, we're both on Truex here. I feel like he's really good at Martinsville too, so I don't want to say like this is his best chance to win, but I feel like this is probably his best chance to win. He hasn't been like the best qualifying this year, and having that like off the truck raw speed and qualifying matters so much at Martinsville that like I think this is his best chance. He did,
and he looked really good at Vegas this past week too, right? He was competing with Christopher Bell at certain points for the lead there on speed.
Yep.
So Martin Truex Jr. is our turn 1 pick. Stevie has him for a top 10 finish minus 115. I'm taking him for a top 5 at plus 275. So we'll take the corner in the turn 2. All right, turn 2 is the Stewart-Haas Racing corner, Stevie. What is your Stewart-Haas Racing driver and pick here?
I'm going to go to Chase Briscoe for a top 10 here at plus 275. And, I mean, he hasn't been the best at Homestead, but he hasn't been the worst. He's had, top 15 speed. But here's the thing, and this is I'm throwing all the data out. Just throwing it out. It's over there in the trash can over there. I know that makes you go crazy because you're the data guy. And I love data too. Don't get me wrong. All this bet is what I saw at Darlington. Yep. I was at that race. I watched how incredible that car was. And I feel like, how do you not just put that car right back on the truck and go to Homestead with that car? Very similar type of racetrack as far as banking and tire wear. And I mean, it was incredible how good Chase Briscoe was at that Homestead race. We talked about it a lot after the fact, but yeah, I mean, he's definitely trended in the right direction. If we look at like the Darlington Homestead data, and after watching how good he was at Darlington too, it felt silly not to bet this. So I'm going to bet his top 10 here at plus 275. And again, it's really just going off of the eye test at Homestead.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he just won Darlington. So the most recent comparable track, the best comparable track. I agree with you. You know, my model's not showing value on this, but I am always willing to override a model play if it's not really accounting for enough of a recency adjustment, and which I think could be the case here with Chase Briscoe. For me, though, I'm going to his teammate Noah Gragson for a top 10 finish. You can get that plus 460. I took it 6-1 earlier in the week. Wrote an article up about it, and then it ended up moving to plus 400, I believe, at that book. But there still is plus 460 out there on Noah Gragson, and I do like that. My model actually has Noah Gragson just over 20% to finish inside of the top 10, 20.8%. So that's like right around 4-1. So I'm fine if you play that all the way down to here. And we just saw his teammate win the best comparable track, right? So we know Stewart-Haas Racing can bring speed to this track type. Well, Homestead is Noah Gregson's single best track. If we look at my track quality metric, this is like a plus 25% track for him. So he's 25% better at Homestead than he is at his average track. And in the Xfinity series, in his 4 non-DNF Homestead races, his average driver rating was over 130. 150 is perfect. And Kyle Larson, his best tracks in the Cup Series are right at 130, 133, which Homestead is one of them. So what Gragson was doing to the Xfinity Series is what Kyle Larson has been doing to the Cup Series in terms of Homestead performance. So I think that'll translate here. And Eric Almirola finished top 10 in this very car here last year. So I'm going to take Noah Gragson top 10 finish plus 460. Your thoughts on this one, Stevie?
I love Noah at Homestead. You know, he was one that I absolutely loved in the Xfinity series here. Like, loved. I mean, when we play DFS, everyone knows that. And he was just like an auto lock for me at Homestead anytime he was in the Xfinity series here, too. So I'm probably going to follow you up on this one. I think that this is a good tale. And I'm in with you on this one. I don't know why I didn't think about it earlier in the week either. But yeah, I mean, I love Noah at this racetrack, and there was like a lot of testing here back in the day at the Xfinity series, and he did a lot of it, and he did it with the camera on the wing, and like he had no issues running the top. And you have to be able to run the top at Homestead. That's why Kyle Larson's so good here. That's why Bell's so good here. That's why Reddick's good here. Like you have to be able to run the top.
Yeah, absolutely. And both Chase Briscoe and Noah Gragson can do that. Those are our turn 2 picks, each for a top 10 finish. So we're halfway through a lap at Homestead. That means we have 2 turns left. The first of those, of course, is turn 3. All right, turn 3, Stevie. Gonna go to a couple of playoff drivers now. Top 5 picks. Which one is yours?
Yeah, I'm going to go to Christopher Bell for a top 5 here at plus 110. I think Bell is the most consistent driver in NASCAR right now. Like right now, we look at this last like stretch of races. He has a 4.4 average finish over the last 5 races. He's finished 5th, 7th, 6th, 2nd, and 2nd. He's averaging 29 fastest laps and 55 laps led. He has the highest driver rating. He's just been absolutely incredible. Best average running position. And then if we go to Homestead, Homestead has been kind of a hit or miss for him, but he's coming off of a win here. He just won this race last year. He finished 11th the year before. He got better as that race went on last year. And, you know, obviously Christopher Bell is someone that can run the top, so we're not too concerned with that. We talked about him a lot at this fall Darlington race, and he had a lot of speed at that race. So everything's pointing to Christopher Bell being fast. He's been really fast on 1.5s. Obviously, he was by far not even close to fastest car last weekend at Las Vegas. I feel like they're just hitting their stride at the perfect time. His pit crew continues to be the best on pit road, and he has cleaned up a lot of his pit road stuff. So I thought about betting his outright. It's really hard to bet his outright at his current number. So I took his top 5 here for a little bit of a safety valve. But yeah, I like Bell a lot for top 5 at plus 110.
Yeah, I mean, Christopher Bell is on an absolute tear, right? If you look at his last, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 races, he has 7 top 7 finishes. So, I mean, the dude is just getting it done everywhere. And certainly Homestead, one of those tracks where he can get it done as well. For me, though, I'm going to a different playoff driver. I'm going to take Chase Elliott for a top 5 finish, also at plus 275, like Martin Truex Jr. was. And my model popped last week on Chase Elliott. It worked out. I mean, he had arguably one of the top 3 or 4 cars. He was running 5th, just for going from 18th to 5th on speed in that first stage in Vegas and was catching Kyle Larson. Then the caution came out, shook things up, and he got involved in that crash. But Chase Elliott was probably a top 3 car at Vegas. Models popping on him here at Homestead as well. I was a little surprised, but it's given him a 33% chance to finish in the top 5, which is even a little bit better than it's giving Truex. I wouldn't mind if you wanted to flip those two, but either way, both are value at plus 275, right? So I have Chase Elliott finishing in the top 5, closer to 2-1 fair odds. So just another driver that kind of like Christopher Bell, although Bell doing it at an even higher level, Chase Elliott has just been good and consistent everywhere this year. He hasn't had the finishes at Homestead recently, 14th, and 15th in his last 3. But I think this year's performance has been much better overall. And I do think the market is inflating his odds simply because of those 3 recent finishes. But he has, prior to that, a 2nd and a 5th place finish as well. So not his best track, but I think the odds have been inflated. There's going to be a lot of focus on trying to get him on a race-winning strategy, as you were talking about, because he's one of those guys on the outside looking in, which also elevates his ceiling. It lowers his floor, but elevates his ceiling, and that's what we're looking for in a top 5 finish.
Yeah, I really debated on betting his outright earlier this week because of how much speed he had at Las Vegas. I think he was, like you said, I think he was a top 3 car. I think he was better than Larson.
Yep.
He had an incredible car last weekend, and I feel like the focus kind of shifts a little bit to Chase Elliott here if you're Hendrick, because like Larson's so good here, William Byron's so good here. You're not necessarily too concerned about those 2 cars, but you're like, hey, how do we get Chase in the playoffs as well? Byron's so good at Martinsville. Kyle Larson's just good everywhere. So yeah, I mean, I really debated on betting this outright. You know, if you go back and look at like the 2022 race here, he was incredibly fast. So yeah, I mean, I like this Chase Elliott thought process.
Yeah, it's just kind of attacking I don't want to say a buy low, but it's a Homestead buy low, even though he kind of just came off a high performance at Vegas. But then again, he crashed out in Vegas. So,
yep.
It almost is just like an all around buy low spot on Chase Elliott. So one more turn left. Stevie and I will get that to you once we get through turn 4. All right, last turn here, Stevie. Looks like you're going to another top 10 bet on a non-playoff driver.
Yeah, non-playoff driver. I don't know if he necessarily has the upside to win. It wouldn't shock me. We talked a lot about Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing, just kind of testing stuff, and they had brought some really good race cars again last week. But I'm going to go to Brad Keselowski for a top 10 here at plus 110. Keselowski is too good at high tire wear racetracks not to have interest in him at a plus bet here. Finished 5th here in the next gen car in 2022. Had a really good race car last year. Kind of lost some track position and then got involved in, I guess, turn 2 or turn 4 on a restart and kind of ended his day. I think he finished like 27th, 28th or something. So the speed has been there. He's been top 10 in speed in each next gen race here. And if we just kind of open up our data to Homestead, Darlington, and Auto Club since the start of last season, he has the best average finish, 9.3, 5 top 10s. He has the most top 10s in those 7 races. So Keselowski's just really good at high tire wear racetracks. And I don't want to bet him to win this race. I don't think that Keselowski necessarily has shown the ability to win at this racetrack recently. But I do think he has a good probability for a top 10, and getting it at plus money seemed like a really plus EV bet.
So for my turn 4 pick, I'm going to go to a different Ford driver, and I'm going to take Austin Cindric over at Bet365 to win Group D. You can get that at plus 550. The other drivers in that group are AJ Allmendinger, Chase Briscoe, and Daniel Suarez. And this is just a straight model-based play. Look, we know AJ Allmendinger is very good here. He is one of 2 drivers to have 2 top 10 finishes at this track in the next-gen era. You're on Chase Briscoe. I like that as well. But plus 550 is just too long here. All these guys are relatively close in my model, with Dinger and Briscoe leading, and then Cindric and Suarez bringing up the bottom portion of that group. But Austin Cindric, he just finished 12th at this race last year, which is second in this group, behind only AJ Allmendinger. He finished ahead of Daniel Suarez, ahead of Chase Briscoe, and Austin Cindric overall very good at Homestead when you talk about track quality metric. He dominated the 2021 Xfinity Homestead race, ended up finishing 5th. And then in 2020, he finished 2nd at Homestead. So his 2 most recent Xfinity races, he did great. 12th for him last year was one of his better results, right? So this is a good track for Austin Cindric. He also just had a really good car at Las Vegas. He also got caught up in the incident at Las Vegas and, had a very fast car. He actually ended up passing Kyle Larson at one point, I believe it was. Prior to that incident, he looked really good at Kansas for having issues at Kansas. So some of these recent kind of secondary correlated tracks as well, Austin Cindric has had a lot of speed. It's had bad luck, but a lot of speed. So plus 550, just straight model-based play. Too long here, Stevie.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I like Briscoe. I talked about it. I think that's going to be his biggest hurdle win this group. AJ Allmendinger has been very good at Homestead, but the 16 car has been awful this season. I mean, obviously they want to get AJ some reps before returning full time, and they're going to be doing everything they can. But how do you not overlook, like, how is it possible to overlook the speed of the 16 car this year? They haven't been top 30 in speed in any 1.5 race this year. So yeah, this is a good track for him. I don't want to say that it's not, but you look at what this car in general has done and you're just like, what the heck? So yeah, I mean, I don't hate this idea. No idea what to really expect from Daniel Suarez. They showed last week that they're just going to be very aggressive with strategy in the opportune times. So that could be a hurdle, but yeah, I mean, that all is factored into the plus 550 number.
Right.
So, you're starting.
There's 4 cars in this group. So
yeah, you're starting at a 25%, because it's 1 out of 4. So yeah.
Yeah. If everybody was equal, it'd be plus 300. So even if Austin Cindric is slightly worse than the average here, which I think he is, plus 400 is much closer to what I would have here. So I love getting plus 550. It's just a nice long number there. So we have completed our lap of Homestead at Miami Speedway. That means there's only one thing left to do and drive into victory lane. Stevie, we're going to yet another non-playoff driver for our victory lane pick. Who are we looking at?
Yeah, non-playoff driver that I think has the upside to win, and he doesn't care as much about playoff drivers as others. And that's Ross Chastain for a top 5 here at plus 325. Get this at Hard Rock and Bet Rivers. Bet 365 has this at plus 300. So you could definitely shop this around. Nick and I both like it at plus 300 or better. That's kind of what we want. I bet is outright at 25-1 for a quarter unit as well, just because I thought that number was just too good. First of all, Ross just doesn't care. Second of all, Ross is very good at high tire wear steep tracks. So if there is somebody outside of the playoff 8 that can win this race, he has to be up towards the top of that list with like a Keselowski, like we talked about. So yeah, I mean, I like Chastain. He has 4 top 5 finishes in the last 7 of these high tire wear steep tracks, Darlington, Homestead, and Auto Club from 2023. So yeah, I mean, coming off of a 5th place finish at Darlington, had a really good car, a lot of speed, and Chastain doesn't care. If he can go out and win a race, for him and his team and his sponsors, like, that's great for him. And, Justin Marks doesn't care. This team is built around winning. So yeah, I mean, I like Chastain here at a top 5. I don't think he necessarily would race anybody dirty for what it's worth. I feel like he is a very aggressive driver, but he's been a lot more aware of others around him being aggressive recently. And I think that's a huge step in the right direction for Ross. And I'm a huge Ross Chastain fan. I really like what he's doing. I just think he's great for the sport. And I mean, I like the data on this one a lot.
Yeah, me too. You mentioned we were looking for our victory lane pick. You mentioned Ross, and I hadn't even really considered him a ton. And then I looked, I was like, dude, he's popping in my model. How did I miss all of this? He's 30% for a top 5 in my model, which again is right at that plus 233 number that was similar with Truex, which is why we threw Chastain in victory lane instead of Truex. You're getting an even longer number on Chastain and have about similar odds to finish top 5. I have Ross Chastain at like 6% to win. So you mentioned that 25 to 1 outright. I don't mind if you want to sprinkle a 25 to 1 outright yet. I haven't. I'm on the top 5 here. But I do think what you can do, right, because I've given 3 top 5s on this show. I've given Chase Elliott, Martin Truex Jr., Ross Chastain. Do 1 unit on Truex and maybe 0.75 on Elliott if you don't like him as much at this particular track, and then do 0.75 on Ross. And that way you're in for 2.5 units. As long as one of these hits, you're making a good chunk of profit here. So I think that's how you can size these 3 top 5s. And there's always a chance at least 2 of them hit, right? Maybe even 3. So that's what I like. But yeah, Ross Chastain popping in the model. Stevie likes him. You can't go wrong with him. Ross Chastain, top 5 finish is our victory lane pick here on Running Hot. So that'll do it for us. Thank you for listening to the Straight Talk Wireless 400 episode of Running Hot, Action Network's Motorsports Betting Podcast. We'll be back next week as we talk bets for the Xfinity 500 at Martinsville Speedway. On behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you back here next week on Running Hot from Action Network.